The year is 216 BC. Dust rises from the scorched plain of Cannae as the sun bleeds into bronze helmets. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers stand in tight formation, hearts trembling beneath armor that once felt immortal. Across the field, Hannibal's army waits, Carthaginian, Iberian, Celtic, a storm of vengeance. The wind carries the low growl of elephants and the faint clang of distant shields. When the trap closes, the world tilts. By nightfall, Rome bleeds more than men, it bleeds belief itself. But among the ashes of defeat, one family will rise in the Scipios, heirs to duty, ambition, and fire. They will forge salvation from ruin, and in doing so, challenge the fate of empires. If stories of courage rising from catastrophe move you, join us, and let the past speak once more. The city of Rome does not sleep. It holds its breath. The Tiber glides through the darkness like a wounded serpent, its waters carrying the ash of offerings burned to gods who seem suddenly deaf. From the Palatine Hill, the scent of smoke and oil drifts down through narrow streets where torches tremble in the hands of mourners. The sound of footsteps echoes on stone, slow and hollow, the march of a nation mourning itself. In the Forum, women kneel before statues of Mars and Jupiter, their tears darkening the marble steps. Children clutch wax figures of their fathers, praying that the gods might trade clay for flesh, but no miracle comes. Beyond the city walls, messengers ride hard from the south, their horses frothing, their eyes haunted. Each carries the same truth: Cannae is lost. Rome's legions, when 80,000 strong, are dead or scattered. The earth of Apulia drinks their blood. In the Senate, torches cast long shadows across men who have forgotten how to breathe. They stare at the floor as if the grain of the marble might whisper a reason, some divine explanation for the slaughter. Names are read aloud. Some senators weep silently. Others sit in stone-faced disbelief. Every family touched, every hope cut, and among those names lies the weight of a dynasty, the Scipios. In distant Spain, word travels by sea and rumor. There, beneath the hot sun of Tarraco, two Roman generals, Publius Scipio and his brother Gnaeus, command the last Roman footholds against Carthaginian expansion. They fight not for glory but for survival, yet even they, seasoned and stern, do not see the net drawing around them. Hasdrubal Barca, Hannibal's brother, moves swift as a shadow, his elephants crashing through forests, his mercenaries striking like lightning in the hills. The war in Spain burns quietly, unseen by the Senate, but its embers will soon ignite a legacy. Far from Spain's cliffs, in Rome itself, a young man kneels before the flickering flame of a household shrine. His hands tremble. Publius Cornelius Scipio, son of the fallen general, barely 20 years old, stares into the flame and whispers the old words: prayers for safe return, for victory, for forgiveness. But tonight there is no answer. Only the crackle of dying oil and the memory of a father's voice. He remembers standing beside his father at dawn years before, watching the legions form in perfect lines. He remembers the smell of leather and iron, the glint of sunlight on shields, and the pride in his father's eyes as he spoke of Rome's eternal destiny. "We are not born for comfort, my son," the elder Scipio had said. "We are born to carry the weight of the Republic." Now that weight lies heavy upon the boy's shoulders. The next messenger arrives before midnight. His tunic is torn, his arm bound with cloth stiff from dried blood. He kneels before the Scipio household and delivers his news with the voice of a ghost. The brothers Scipio, both slain in Spain, their legions destroyed, their banners trampled underfoot. The silence that follows is colder than any winter. Outside, thunder rolls across the hills, as if the gods themselves mourn the lineage that once shielded Rome. In the morning, the city moves like a creature in pain. Funeral pyres rise along the banks of the Tiber. The smell of burning cedar mingles with salt from the river's mist. Women cut their hair and scatter it into the flames. Priests chant litanies that no one believes. Among them stands the young Scipio, his cloak heavy with ash, his face hollowed by sleepless nights. The fire before him consumes what remains of his father, a man turned to ember and memory. When the last spark fades, he does not weep. He merely stands, the wind tugging at his cloak, the sky turning red above him. Beside him, an old family retainer murmurs, "Rome endures, young master. She always endures." But Scipio does not answer. His eyes are fixed on the horizon. Not the horizon of Rome, but of Spain, where his father fell. Somewhere beyond that distance, the shadow of Carthage still moves, still breathes. Hannibal's war has not yet touched the heart of the young man, but he feels its pulse all the same. A quiet fury begins to burn, not wild but measured, steady like coals waiting for breath. That night he walks the streets alone. The lamps gutter in the wind. Every corner holds the weight of grief. Widows whispering prayers, soldiers limping from distant fronts, beggars muttering the names of gods no longer trusted. Yet amid the ruin, Scipio feels something stir. Rome has been broken before, by Gauls, by famine, by kings. Each time she rose, harder, colder, more relentless. Perhaps he thinks the gods do not abandon Rome. They test her. Perhaps this is not an ending, but a summons. In the temple of Jupiter, the priests have locked the gates. None may enter. But Scipio does. He pushes open the bronze doors, the hinges screaming in protest. The air inside is heavy with incense and fear. Moonlight filters through the cracks in the roof, illuminating the colossal figure of Jupiter himself. Stone eyes staring down into mortal despair. Scipio kneels upon the cold floor and presses his hand to the earth. "Father," he whispers, "if your spirit sees me, guide me. If the gods still hear me, test me. Let me bear the fire that devoured you, and I will make of it Rome's salvation." No thunder answers. No light breaks the darkness. But when he stands, the silence feels different, less empty, more alive. The weight that once crushed his chest now settles into his bones, heavy but his to carry. In that moment, the boy becomes something else. Not yet a hero, not yet a general, but a vessel of purpose. Outside, dawn creeps across the rooftops. The first bells of the city ring, faint, uncertain, but steady. Somewhere the Senate gathers again, debating how to stem the tide of Hannibal's advance. They will speak of numbers, of strategies, of politics. They will not speak of one grieving son. Yet it is in that quiet corner of Rome, not the Senate hall, that history begins to turn. Scipio steps into the light, his face streaked with ash, his eyes bright with something beyond sorrow. He has lost his father, his uncles, his brothers in arms, all swallowed by the war that now threatens to consume the world. But as the morning sun rises over the ruins of courage, he breathes a single promise to the wind. Rome will not fall while I still draw breath. And the wind, for a moment, seems to pause, as if listening. The weeks that follow are a blur of mourning and mobilization. Rome moves like a wounded beast, bleeding but alive. Every forum, every temple, every household bears the scars of loss. Yet beneath the grief, a grim determination begins to harden. The Republic will not die on its knees. It will rise, even if its bones must rise with it. The Senate issues decrees calling for new levies, new sacrifices. Old men and boys alike are enlisted. Slaves are promised freedom for service. Farmers leave their fields barren to take up spears that feel too heavy in their hands. In every district, the sound of hammers on anvil fills the air. The rhythm of desperation turned to defiance. Scipio watches this from a distance. He no longer wears the simple white of mourning. His cloak is crimson now, the color of resolve. He attends the Senate only once as the youngest member of his line, to offer what little influence remains to his family's name. Few notice him. The city's great men, Fabius, Varro, and the rest, speak of fortifications, of delaying Hannibal's march, of protecting what remains. They speak of caution, but Scipio, young as he is, sees something in their fear that disgusts him. He thinks of his father's voice, calm amid chaos. A man who fears death already serves his enemy. Outside the Curia, he finds a small crowd gathered, soldiers, veterans, and widows. Their faces lift as he passes. They whisper his name with reverence and pity. To them, he is not yet the Scipio of legend, but a remnant of what Rome once was, noble blood left untarnished in an age of ruin. One old soldier, his arm bound in a crude sling, steps forward and salutes. "Your father was a lion," he says hoarsely. "If there's fight left in you, we'll follow." Those words linger. They burn. That night, Scipio rides out beyond the walls to a small villa overlooking the Tiber. It is the family's last estate, untouched by the riots that followed Cannae. Inside, the air smells of cedar and dust. Scrolls line the walls, the wisdom of generations, treaties, campaigns, letters from ancestors who had served the Republic since its birth. Among them, he finds a weathered parchment written in his father's hand. The ink has faded, but the words cut deep. "Remember, my son, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the will to act despite it." He folds the letter and presses it to his chest. Then act I shall, he murmurs. The words taste of iron and grief. Over the following days, a quiet plan begins to form, not born of ambition but necessity. Scipio seeks out veterans of his father's campaigns, men hardened by years of fighting in the Iberian hills. Some are crippled, some broken, yet when they hear his voice, something awakens in them. He speaks not as a senator but as a son, of duty, of Rome's soul, of the debt they owe to the fallen. If we yield now, he tells them, we dishonor every grave that burns along the Tiber. But if we rise, the world will remember that even in ruin, Rome still breathes fire. By candlelight, oaths are sworn. Old blades are sharpened. Armor once buried in dust is brought out again. It is not rebellion they prepare for him, it is redemption. Meanwhile, whispers reach the Senate of Hannibal's movements. He ravages the countryside, taking towns that once swore loyalty to Rome. Yet he never marches on the city itself. Some call it mercy, others mockery. The people grow restless. Rumors spread that the gods have abandoned them entirely. The temples are full, but faith feels hollow. Even the priests begin to falter, their prayers recited like obligations rather than belief. In this atmosphere of dread, Scipio's resolve shines brighter. He trains with his men in secret fields outside the city, pushing them to exhaustion. They fight not for pay, not even for glory, but for meaning. The dust rises like ghostly smoke each time they clash, each strike echoing with the names of the dead. And as the weeks pass, the young leader's composure deepens. His words sharpen. His movements grow deliberate. The boy who once prayed for guidance now commands it. One evening, as the sun sets behind the hills, Scipio dismisses his men and stands alone, watching the river catch the last light of day. His mother's voice calls from the villa, weary, loving, afraid. "You are not your father," she says softly. "You owe Rome nothing more." He turns to her with eyes that seem far older than his years. "No," he replies, "but Rome owes him everything, and I will see that debt repaid." There is no argument, only the sound of cicadas and the faint whisper of the river. The next morning he appears once more before the Senate. The chamber is tense. The war in Spain has collapsed. Carthaginian armies hold nearly every stronghold. Rome's influence in the region and its crucial silver is slipping away. A proposal lies on the table: to abandon the Iberian campaign entirely, to recall what remains of the Roman legions and focus defense within Italy. Scipio stands and requests permission to speak. Laughter ripples through the chamber. He is young, untested, the orphan of a fallen house, but his voice does not waver. "If you abandon Spain," he begins, "you abandon Rome's soul. You yield the very ground where my father and uncle gave their lives. Hannibal's power will not end at our borders. It will grow, and when it returns, it will return with the full weight of Carthage behind it." A senator interrupts him, old, bitter, afraid. "And who would you have led such a lost cause, boy?" "You?" Scipio meets his gaze without blinking. "Yes," he says simply. The word falls like a sword striking stone. The room murmurs, half in disbelief, half in awe. Even Fabius, the cautious savior of Rome, studies him with a new curiosity. There is madness in the proposal, to send a youth to command in Spain. But there is also something else: hope, fragile yet defiant. After a long silence, Fabius speaks. "Let him go," he says. "If fortune favors him, we may yet survive. If not, we lose nothing we have not already lost," and so the motion passes. The young Scipio is granted command of the Roman forces in Iberia, not by acclaim but by resignation. A gamble cast in the dark. That night he returns to his villa. The city sleeps uneasily, dreaming of storms. He stands once more before the household shrine, the faint glow of the lamp painting his face in amber light. He does not pray this time. He only whispers, "I will not fail you." Outside, thunder rumbles over the distant hills. It is not yet a storm, but something is coming. The morning Scipio departs for Spain, the city is veiled in mist. Dawn spills pale light across the forum, turning marble to ghostly silver. Rome stirs reluctantly, as if afraid to wake to another day of loss. Soldiers gather along the Via Appia, armor clattering, standards swaying in the weak breeze. The air carries the smell of wet stone and oil, the scent of departure, of duty. Scipio rides at the head of his small escort, his cloak drawn tight against the chill. He does not look back toward the Palatine Hill, where his mother stands behind a veil, watching the only son she has left. To look would be to break. And Scipio cannot break, not now. Every heartbeat feels like a command from the dead. The streets are lined with citizens, silent, curious, uncertain. They whisper as he passes. Some bow their heads in respect. Others turn away in disbelief. Too young, one murmurs. Too proud, says another. But among them, an old soldier raises his fist and calls out, "For the Scipios!" The cry catches like wildfire. Soon the air trembles with the chant, rough and desperate. "For the Scipios! For Rome!" The echo follows him beyond the gates. As the city fades behind him, the land opens. Fields left untended. Villages hollowed by fear. The earth bears scars of Hannibal's passage. Burnt farms, broken altars, trees blackened by fire. Ravens circle above the ruins, their calls sharp as steel. Yet amid this desolation, Scipio feels clarity. War has stripped the world of illusion. All that remains is purpose. They travel south toward the port of Puteoli, where Roman ships await to carry them across the sea. The horizon gleams faintly, a promise and a warning. The voyage will be perilous. Carthaginian patrols prowl the waters, their sails dark against the sun. But Scipio feels no fear. Fear to him is a relic of boyhood. On the third night of travel, they make camp near the ruins of a burned villa. The wind moans through shattered columns, carrying the scent of salt and ash. As his men sleep, Scipio walks among the remnants. Charred walls, broken amphorae, a child's toy half buried in dust. He kneels and runs his fingers through the blackened soil. The earth is still warm in places, as if remembering what it lost. "This," he whispers, "is what they've done to us." He rises, his expression carved from grief. "This is what we will undo." Before dawn, he gathers his men. They stand in a circle, torches flickering in the darkness. Scipio's voice is steady, low, carrying like the murmur of thunder. "You have seen what Carthage leaves behind. You have seen what Rome becomes when fear rules her. But fear is not eternal, Rome is. My father's bones lie in Spain. My uncle's blood stains its fields. I go there not for revenge, but for redemption. If any of you wish to turn back, do so now, and I will honor you. But if you stay, know this. We march not as soldiers of a broken republic. We march as its heartbeat, no one moves. Not one man steps away. The torches flare as if in answer. Days later, the sea stretches before them, vast, dark, and endless. The ships await, sails bound tight, decks slick with dew. Scipio boards first, the timber creaking beneath his boots. The captain salutes awkwardly. Even the sailors, hardened by years of war, seem to sense the gravity of this voyage. As the ropes are cast off and the oars dip into the water, the shoreline begins to shrink until Rome is nothing but a faint blur swallowed by mist. The voyage is long and restless. Storms roll in from the west, tossing the ships like driftwood. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating faces pale with exhaustion. Yet Scipio stands on the prow through it all, cloak whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. To his men, he seems unshakable, a statue carved of intent. But within him, doubt flickers. What if the Senate was right? What if he leads them only to another grave? On the seventh night, when the storm breaks and the sky clears, he climbs to the deck alone. The stars stretch endlessly above, cold and eternal. He stares upward and murmurs to the sea, "Father, if I fall, let it be forward." At dawn, land emerges. Spain, scarred and beautiful. The hills rise like the backs of sleeping giants, and the air hums with distant drums. On the shore, Roman banners flutter weakly above a battered encampment. Survivors of past defeats watch from behind wooden palisades, faces thin, armor rusted. When they see the newcomer, they do not cheer. They simply stare. Scipio dismounts as he enters the camp. The soldiers part to let him through. He can feel their eyes, weary, doubtful, haunted. They have seen generals come and go. They have buried too many. "Who commands here?" he asks. A grizzled centurion steps forward. "We did, sir," the man says bitterly. "Until now." Scipio studies him. "Then command again," he says. "But this time command with me." The words are simple, yet they ripple through the ranks like a spark through dry grass. For the first time in months, something changes. Posture, breath, the faint lift of a chin. Hope is a dangerous thing, but it has returned. That evening, Scipio calls the officers to his tent. A rough map lies spread across the table, marked with stones and scraps of parchment. He traces the lines of rivers, the contours of hills. Hasdrubal commands from the south, he says. His army is large but scattered. He believes Rome is broken. That is his mistake. We will strike first, and we will strike where he least expects. An older officer scoffs. We lack the numbers. The men are starved. We need time. Scipio looks up, his gaze sharp. Time is the one thing Hannibal does not give. Every heartbeat we delay, he grows stronger. Rome has forgotten how to act. I have not. The tent falls silent. Then slowly, reluctantly, the officers nod. Strategy becomes motion, and motion becomes belief. Outside, the wind sweeps through the camp carrying the scent of salt and smoke. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Hannibal still reigns, his victories echoing like thunder. But in this small corner of the world, the tide begins to turn. Rome has found its pulse again. Scipio steps outside into the night. The stars above Spain seem brighter than those above Rome, sharper, closer, as if watching. He closes his eyes, feeling the cold wind on his face. For you, Father, he whispers. For Rome. And far away, across the fields and mountains, a new dawn gathers strength. End of Chapter 1. The Fire That Devours Fathers. The following weeks are marked by momentum. Allied tribes pour in, swelling the Roman ranks. Iberia, once fractured, begins to pulse as a single body. Scipio moves quickly, striking Hasdrubal's supply lines, raiding his convoys, burning his grain stores. His armies seem to appear from nowhere, ghosts of discipline and precision. When the Carthaginians retaliate, they find empty fields and vanished enemies. Scipio fights not by numbers but by rhythm, a dance of misdirection and speed. One night, a captured Carthaginian officer is brought before him. Bloodied but proud, the man spits at Scipio's feet. You think you can outmatch the sons of Barca? You're a child playing at war. Scipio leans forward, his voice soft. Tell me, soldier, do you fear your own commanders? The man hesitates, unsure. I obey them. That is not what I asked. Scipio's tone sharpens. You obey because you must. My men follow because they choose to. That is the difference between Rome and Carthage, and that is why I will win. He rises, turning to his guards. Treat him well. Let him live to carry truth home. The next day, the prisoner is released, limping back to Hasdrubal's camp with more than wounds, with a seed of doubt. It is Scipio's most potent weapon. But war is never only glory. It is also cost. The Iberian sun burns mercilessly and the rivers run low. Supplies dwindle. Fever creeps through the camp like smoke. One night, as Scipio tends to a wounded soldier, Laelius approaches. You cannot save them all, he says quietly. Scipio looks up, his eyes hollow but unyielding. Then I will save enough that Rome remembers why we fight. Days later, word arrives. Hasdrubal has begun to march north, his forces gathering like thunderclouds. Scipio climbs a ridge to see the horizon darken with banners, a wave of iron and vengeance. For a long moment he stands still, the wind tugging at his cloak. Then he speaks to the air as if to the ghosts of his fathers. It was here you fell, he whispers. Let it be here I rise. He descends to the camp, calling his commanders to council. We do not wait for the storm, he says. We become it. As night falls, the soldiers ready their weapons. The fires burn low, the air thick with anticipation. Somewhere in the dark, a Roman horn sounds, long and low like the breath of destiny. And beneath that sound, the young general closes his eyes and sees a vision. Not of blood or death, but of Rome reborn, forged in the crucible of a foreign sun. The wind carries his whisper across the camp. Tomorrow, Iberia will remember its conqueror. The dawn that follows is crimson, not from blood yet, but from the Iberian sunrise spilling over the hills. Scipio stands on a rise overlooking the plain, where dust already curls like mist above the moving Carthaginian columns. He can hear them before he sees them. The rhythmic clatter of hooves, the growl of wheels, the dull, thunderous heartbeat of an army that knows it has come to end a legend before it begins. The Romans wait in silence. No shouting, no bravado, only the soft creak of leather and the whisper of steel. Scipio walks among them, touching a shoulder here, meeting a gaze there. He carries no grand speech, only presence, and it is enough. When he passes, men straighten as if an unseen current moves through them. Laelius rides up beside him. Hasdrubal's numbers outmatch ours nearly 2-1, he murmurs. Scipio's eyes stay fixed on the horizon. Then we must outmatch his mind. His tone is not pride, but certainty, like a craftsman describing the next stroke of his blade. He orders the legions into formation, but not in the rigid lines of Rome's tradition. Instead, he spreads them thin, almost fragile, leaving gaps where none should be. Laelius frowns. You invite him in? Scipio nods once. Let him come close. Let him think he's winning. His gaze drifts to the distant dust, and when he reaches for victory, we will close our hand. By midday, Hasdrubal's vanguard crashes upon them. Iberian mercenaries scream their war cries, spears glinting in the fierce sun. The first impact shakes the plain. The Romans hold it barely. Shields grind against shields. Men cry out, and the air fills with the scent of sweat and iron. For a moment, it seems the line will break. But then Scipio raises his arm. A small motion that ripples through thousands. Trumpets blare. The flanks, hidden until now in low ravines, surge forward in perfect unison. What had looked like weakness becomes the jaws of a trap. From his chariot, Hasdrubal realizes too late. He sees his center collapsing, his mercenaries turning, his elephants trapped in chaos. It's impossible, he mutters. No Roman fights like this. Yet before his eyes he watches order devour disorder. Scipio rides through the melee, his sword flashing not as a weapon but as a beacon. Around him the tide shifts. Men fight harder simply because he is near. Hours later the plain is silent again. Smoke rises from broken wagons. The crows circle above. Hasdrubal's army lies shattered, his banners torn, his confidence bleeding into the dirt. The Romans stand victorious, though at heavy cost. Thousands lie still, Romans and Iberians alike indistinguishable in death. Scipio walks among them, his face unreadable. When he kneels beside a fallen soldier, he whispers, "You did not die for me. You died so that Rome might learn how to live again." That night the camp glows dimly with scattered fires. The men sing out softly, not in triumph but remembrance. Scipio sits apart, staring into the flame. Laelius joins him, handing him a cup of wine. "Rome will celebrate this day," he says. Scipio doesn't answer. His eyes remain on the fire. "They will call it victory," he murmurs. "But I see only the beginning of a debt. Every triumph demands repayment." Laelius studies him for a long time. "You speak as though you already know your end." Scipio's lips curl faintly. "I know only that men who rise too high in Rome seldom descend gently." Above them, the stars burn cold. The wind carries distant sounds, the low murmur of the wounded, the crackle of embers, the faint song of men who will live to remember this day. And beneath it all, the whisper of destiny stirs like a current, a sense that the young general's path is only beginning, that his victories will echo far beyond the fields of Iberia. A messenger approaches, bowing low. "General, word from Rome, the Senate is divided. Some hail you as a hero. Others fear you grow too strong." Scipio's eyes lift from the flame, their reflection now dark and steady. "Then let them fear," he says quietly. "Fear is the first form of respect." He rises, the firelight outlining his silhouette, a figure both mortal and mythic. Behind him, the camp flickers like a constellation waiting to be named. Before him, the road stretches toward the unknown, toward Africa, toward Hannibal, toward history itself. As he walks away, Laelius calls softly after him. "Where to now?" Scipio doesn't turn. "To finish what my father began." The wind shifts. Somewhere beyond the hills, the sea answers with a low, distant roar, as if remembering the name Scipio, and whispering it back to the stars. The dawn of Zama arrives beneath a blood-orange sky. The earth trembles with the movement of armies long before the first light touches their armor. Across the plain, dust begins to rise, not yet from battle, but from the restless stamping of elephants, the breathing of horses, the murmured prayers of men who sense that this day will be their last. Scipio stands at the front of his legions, his cloak lifted by the morning wind. Behind him, Rome's banners ripple like red flame. He closes his eyes for a moment, listening. The faint clatter of shields, the low hum of horns, the rhythm of life and death assembling into order. When he opens them again, his gaze is steady. "Let every man remember this," he says to his captains. "We fight not to end a war, but to end a fear." Across the plain, Hannibal surveys his lines. His army is vast but weary, veterans from Italy, mercenaries from Africa and Gaul, elephants adorned with bronze masks that glint in the sun. Yet even amid the noise, his calm is absolute. He rides along the front ranks, his voice carrying like a tide. "You have followed me through mountains and storms," he tells them. "You have faced death and called it brother. Today, one last time, you will remind Rome what it means to bleed." The horns of Carthage sound first, deep, guttural, ancient. Then the elephants move. The ground shakes as they charge, a wall of muscle and fury. Dust surges, arrows whistle. Men shout prayers to gods who no longer answer. But Scipio has prepared for this. At his command, the Roman lines part into narrow corridors. Trumpeters blare sharp notes, high and shrill, sounds the elephants have never heard. Confused, the beasts rear and panic, trampling their own ranks. The Carthaginian front begins to falter even before steel meets flesh. Scipio watches, expressionless. He knows the real battle has yet to begin. When the Carthaginian infantry surges forward, the field erupts. Spears splinter, shields collide, and the air thickens with cries and dust. The sun burns overhead, turning the scene into a vision of fire. Roman discipline holds, tight, rhythmic, methodical. Every step is measured, every thrust deliberate. They are not men now, but a single living mechanism, moving to the pulse of their commander's will. Hannibal rides the ridge, eyes darting across the chaos. He sees his center wavering, his mercenaries breaking formation. He lifts his sword, signaling the reserves, his veterans from Italy, men who have marched with him for 15 years. They descend like a tide of iron, their armor blackened with age, their faces carved by memory. When they strike the Roman line, the impact is apocalyptic. For a time, the battle stands on a knife's edge. Neither side yields. The dust hides the sun. The heat bends the air. Men fight until their arms fail, then fight again. In the distance, trumpets echo, signals lost in the storm of noise. Laelius, leading the Roman cavalry, circles wide around the flank, searching for the moment to strike. Scipio at the center waits like a statue amid the storm. Then through the smoke, a signal, a single horn, clear and long. It is the call he has been waiting for. Laelius's cavalry crashes into the Carthaginian rear. The trap closes. Hannibal's army, pinned on all sides, begins to fracture. Panic spreads like fire through dry grass. For every man who stands, two falter. Hannibal's veterans fight on, grim and silent, but even their strength cannot resist the turning of the tide. Scipio moves forward into the chaos, his voice ringing above the din. "Hold the line! Press forward!" His sword rises and falls, glinting in the half-light like the pendulum of fate. Around him, the Roman ranks surge, driven by something deeper than command, by the sense that they are witnessing the end of an age. Hannibal, surrounded by the ruin of his army, dismounts. His horse flees into the smoke, leaving him alone amid the broken spears. He looks toward Scipio, across the maelstrom, across the decades of blood between them, and nods once, as if acknowledging inevitability. By midday, it is done. The field of Zama is silent but for the caw of circling crows. The ground is littered with the fallen, Roman, Carthaginian, ally, enemy, are we all now equal beneath the dust? Scipio stands among them, his armor scorched, his face streaked with grime. The heat shimmers over the plain like a veil. Laelius approaches, breathless, sword still wet. "It's over," he says. Scipio does not answer. His eyes sweep the horizon, searching for something unseen. "No," he says at last, voice low. "Nothing ends. It only changes form." He turns to the wounded, ordering water and mercy for all, even for the Carthaginians. "Let no man say Rome triumphed by cruelty," he tells his officers. "Let them say we learned from our enemy how to be great." As the sun sets, the surviving Romans gather their dead in silence.
Scipio walks alone to the edge of the field.
There, among the broken banners and shattered helms, he kneels. He presses his hand to the earth, feeling the warmth of the dying day. "Father," he whispers, "the debt is paid." That night he receives a messenger. Carthage has sued for peace. The next morning he enters the defeated city not as a conqueror but as a shadow. The streets are lined with silent faces, the air thick with smoke and salt. At the harbor, ships burn slowly, their flames mirrored on the water. A child cries out from a doorway. Scipio turns but says nothing. His eyes are fixed on the horizon, on the sea that will one day carry Rome to every shore. The Senate will call him Africanus. The people will call him savior. But within himself, Scipio feels only the weight of what victory costs, the silence that follows when history stops breathing, even for a moment. He knows that someday, Rome will forget this silence. And when she does, her fall will begin. The years after Zama unfold like a long exhale after a scream. Rome breathes again, yet the air feels different, heavier, older. The war that had defined a generation is over, but peace, as Scipio soon learns, can be more corrosive than battle. He returns to Rome not as a man, but as a legend. Crowds flood the streets, hailing him as the savior of the Republic. Flowers fall from balconies, trumpets sound, and chants echo through the marble avenues. Africanus, Africanus. Yet amid the glory, Scipio's eyes remain distant. For him, the city feels changed, or perhaps he has. The familiar stones, the scent of olive smoke, the hum of the forum all seem muted, dreamlike, as though the real Rome was left behind on the fields of Zama. During his triumphal procession, he rides through the city on a chariot of ivory and gold. Captive Carthaginians walk before him in chains, their faces expressionless beneath the jeers. Among them are men who once served Hannibal, now silent in defeat. Behind them, soldiers carry spoils, coins, banners, ivory tusks, and the broken armor of a conquered world. Yet Scipio feels none of the triumph that surrounds him. As the cheers rise, he looks toward the sky, where a single vulture circles high above the Capitoline hill. Even the gods, he murmurs, come to feed. When the parade ends, Rome erupts into celebration. Feasts are held in every district. Senators toast his name and poets immortalize him in verses dripping with praise. But praise in Rome is a coin with two faces, admiration and envy. In the shadowed corridors of the Senate, whispers begin to coil like smoke. Some say Scipio seeks kingship, others that he has grown too fond of power. What the sword could not destroy, suspicion begins to corrode. One evening, Scipio attends a Senate session, draped not in triumph, but in his plain military cloak. He listens as a new generation of politicians, men who had never seen battle, debate his policies, question his alliances, and pick apart his legacy as though dissecting a corpse. Among them stands Cato the elder, stern and unyielding, his voice carrying through the hall like a blade. Rome, Cato declares, is built on law, not on men, and when a man becomes greater than the law, he becomes a danger to us all. The chamber murmurs in agreement. Scipio rises slowly, his expression calm but cold. Then you must be very afraid, Cato, he says, for the law sleeps soundly while men like me keep watch. The words hang in the air, sharp and unrepentant. The Senate erupts into whispers. From that moment a line is drawn, invisible but irreversible. In the months that follow, Scipio withdraws from public life. He retreats to his villa at Liternum, a quiet estate by the sea. There the wind carries the scent of salt and pine, and the waves murmur against the shore like an old friend. He walks the gardens at dusk, his thoughts heavy, his heart distant. Visitors still come, soldiers seeking wisdom, young officers eager to learn, but his voice has grown softer, almost weary. Laelius visits him often. One evening, as the sun sinks into the water, Laelius finds him sitting on a low wall overlooking the sea. They speak against you again in the Senate, Laelius says. They say your victories made you arrogant. Scipio smiles faintly. They confuse pride with memory. I only remember what it cost to give them peace. Laelius sits beside him. You could return. Remind them who you are. No, Scipio says quietly. If Rome cannot remember her heroes without envy, then she deserves her amnesia. The two men sit in silence, watching the last light fade. The waves crash against the rocks, endless and indifferent. Do you ever think of Hannibal? Laelius asks at last. Every night, Scipio answers. He was the only man who understood me. We were enemies, yet in another world, perhaps we would have been brothers. In the distance, thunder rolls over the sea, a storm forming on the horizon. Scipio's gaze lingers there and his voice lowers. Wars end, he says, but their echoes do not. Rome thinks she has conquered Carthage, but she has only conquered herself. The storm breaks that night. Rain lashes the villa, wind howls through the halls, and the waves batter the shore like drums of memory. Scipio stands at the threshold, watching lightning flicker over the sea. The sight stirs something ancient in him, the memory of firelight, of dust, of banners whipping in the wind. For a moment, he feels the presence of every soldier who fell beside him, every ghost left unburied by history, and in that fleeting silence between thunderclaps, he hears a voice, not his father's, not Hannibal's, but Rome's itself, vast, cold, eternal. It whispers, "We are never satisfied." When morning comes, the storm has passed, but the world feels changed. Scipio walks the shoreline, his footprints sinking into the wet sand. The horizon gleams gold, but the color feels hollow. He stops, turns back toward his villa, and says softly to no one, "So this is what victory becomes." The seasons turn quietly along the coast of Liternum. Each morning, Scipio rises before the sun, walking the gardens while the world still sleeps. The dew clings to the leaves, the sea breathes its ancient rhythm, and for a brief moment he feels at peace, until memory intrudes. For every drop of light that filters through the olive trees, there is a shadow behind it. A voice, a face, a scream from a battlefield long buried. Rome, meanwhile, has forgotten how to listen. With Carthage crippled, her ambitions stretch outward again. New wars are born in Spain and Greece in the east, and once more young men march to die beneath banners that flutter in winds of greed rather than duty. Scipio hears the reports and feels only weariness. "We learned nothing," he says to Laelius one evening. "We traded fear for arrogance." Laelius, faithful as always, tries to console him. "The Republic endures because of what you did." Scipio shakes his head. "No, it endures despite it. When Rome needed a sword, I became one. But swords cannot teach wisdom. They only remind men of how sharp power can be." That winter, news reaches him that Hannibal has been driven into exile, hunted across the Mediterranean like a wounded lion. The Senate calls it justice. Scipio calls it irony. "We destroy the one man who taught us greatness," he mutters, staring into the fire. And then we wonder why greatness fades. Laelius hesitates before asking, "Would you have spared him?" Scipio's eyes reflect the firelight. "I would have kept him close," to remind Rome that the edge of the world is always watching. Months pass. Scipio grows thinner, his hair whitening like sea foam. He writes letters no one answers, speeches no one hears. Sometimes at dusk he walks to the shore and speaks aloud, to ghosts, to waves, to the wind that carries no reply. One evening, as twilight deepens, he kneels beside the surf and whispers, "Tell me, Father, did we win or merely survive?" The waves rise and fall, offering no answer. The silence feels final. But Rome does not allow silence for long. One morning, a messenger arrives from the capital, dust clinging to his cloak. He bears news wrapped in courtesy and poison. The Senate demands an inquiry into Scipio's finances, accusing him of corruption during the African campaigns. It is a petty insult, but a fatal one. Laelius finds him in the atrium, holding the letter with a still hand. "You will not go," Laelius says. "You owe them nothing." Scipio looks up slowly, his eyes calm but distant. "I owe Rome everything," he replies, "but not her envy." He tears the letter in half, then into quarters, the pieces scattering like ash. "If they wish to judge me, let them come here unto the sea, where Rome first learned to breathe without fear." Word spreads swiftly. Scipio Africanus refuses the summons. To his enemies it is proof of guilt. To his soldiers, proof of dignity. But to Scipio himself it means only this, that Rome has become what Hannibal once warned it would. Victorious but hollow, mighty but lost. That night, he writes his final letter to the Senate. The parchment is plain, the ink steady. "I have served you in youth, in battle, in glory, and in peace. I have given you victories you did not deserve and peace you cannot understand. You have my sword no longer. Seek your heroes elsewhere." He seals it with wax, presses his ring into it, and lays it aside. Afterward, he walks once more to the sea. The moonlight spills silver across the waves and the air smells of salt and cedar. He thinks of all the faces he has known, his father, his brother, Laelius, Hannibal, the nameless soldiers who followed him across continents. He feels their weight not as sorrow but as truth. They are the price of glory. "History," he whispers, "is written by those who survive its hunger." The next morning, Laelius finds him sitting on the same low wall where they had once watched the sunset. His eyes are closed, his expression peaceful as though he had fallen asleep listening to the tide. The sea breeze stirs his cloak, carrying with it the faint scent of rosemary and salt. On the stone beside him lies a small inscription, freshly carved into the marble by his own hand. "Ungrateful fatherland, you will not even have my bones." Laelius reads the words and lowers his head. There are no trumpets now, no triumphs, no cries of Africanus. Only the sound of the sea, eternal and indifferent. The man who had saved Rome rests unburied by her will, and perhaps that is fitting. For men like Scipio do not belong to the earth they save. They belong to the memory that refuses to die. Years later, travelers passing along the coast will stop and ask about the empty tomb near the sea. The locals will tell them of a man who once defeated the greatest general in history, and who then chose silence over applause. They will say the waves still whisper his name on certain nights when the wind turns and the stars burn low. And if one listens closely, it is true. The sea still murmurs Scipio, as though the world itself remembers what Rome forgot. The story of the Scipios does not end with death. It lingers like the echo of a distant drum fading through the centuries. The waves that lap at Laternum's shore carry the whispers of his name into every tide that touches Rome's coast. But the city he saved no longer remembers the sound of gratitude. The Republic, drunk on its own victories, marches forward, unaware that it is walking into the same storm from which Scipio once shielded it. It begins quietly. Generals return from new conquests weighed down with gold, their soldiers demanding land and spoils. Senators argue beneath marble ceilings, their voices slick with ambition. Rome, once united by fear of Carthage, now fractures under the weight of its own pride. The veterans who fought under Scipio's banner grow old and bitter, muttering in taverns that the city forgets too easily. They remember the days when glory had meaning, when courage was not measured by coin. In the East, kings bow before Roman legions, but their submission breeds envy and resistance. Macedonia, Syria, Egypt, all learn to fear the shadow that calls itself peace. Rome spreads like wildfire, consuming what it touches, and in its glow burns the faint afterimage of Africanus's warning. We learned nothing, he had said, and history seems determined to prove him right. One scholar, writing a generation later, reflects on the fate of his republic. When we defeated Hannibal, we thought the gods had chosen us, but perhaps they only tested how far arrogance could grow before it devoured its maker. His words are banned, but they survive, hidden in scrolls, whispered by those who still dream of the age when men like Scipio walked the earth. In the Senate, new names rise: Gracchus, Marius, Sulla. Each claims to serve the Republic, yet each carves another wound into its body. They march with the confidence of conquerors and the blindness of heirs who have never earned their inheritance. The people cheer as they once cheered for Scipio, but now the cheers are laced with desperation rather than awe. Bread replaces honor, spectacle replaces virtue, and somewhere deep in the heart of the city, the ashes of the old Scipionic house lie cold. The family line endures, but its spirit, that fire of duty and restraint, unfades with each passing year. There are still men who bear the name Scipio, but none who carry its soul. The memory of the man who ended the Punic Wars becomes a story told by old soldiers to their grandchildren, a name etched on half-forgotten monuments. Yet memory is stubborn. It hides in corners of history, waiting for silence, on certain nights when the Tiber glimmers under the moon and Rome's towers hum with restless dreams. It is said that a shadow walks beside the river. Cloaked in the faint light of another age, it pauses at the forum and looks upon the city that once called him savior. Perhaps it is only the wind through marble arches, or perhaps the ghost of Africanus still walks, measuring what his republic has become. Centuries roll on. Rome transforms from republic to empire, from freedom to throne. Emperors rise who name themselves gods, who claim descent from heroes long dead. Augustus himself, in a moment of quiet reflection, is said to have whispered to his advisors, "Would that I had a Scipio beside me." Yet even he, the architect of empire, builds his peace upon the same foundation of conquest that once drowned the world in fire. The image of Scipio becomes legend. Poets call him the man who spoke with stars. Artists carve his likeness not as a soldier but as a thinker, a philosopher in armor, gazing toward an unseen horizon. And though his enemies are long dust, his victory over Hannibal remains the heartbeat of Roman memory, pulsing beneath the ruins of time. But history has a cruel symmetry. As Rome once watched Carthage burn, so too will others watch Rome. In the final days of empire, when the barbarians stand at her gates and the streets run with the echo of forgotten glory, someone will find an old marble tablet inscribed with a single name, Scipio Africanus. They will brush away the dust, read the words, and feel for a moment that same quiet awe that once swept through legions beneath a North African sun. The man himself is gone, yet his ghost survives, not in stone or story, but in the eternal question that outlives every empire. Can power exist without pride? Can victory exist without virtue? The question lingers like the final chord of a requiem, trembling in the silence of history. In the centuries that follow, the story of Scipio Africanus is told and retold, each age reshaping it to its own desires. To some, he is the perfect Roman, disciplined, dutiful, divinely favored. To others, he is the ghost of what Rome could have been, a warning carved in bronze and pride. Yet between myth and memory lies the man himself, the boy who faced annihilation and chose courage over despair, who looked into Hannibal's eyes and saw not a monster but a mirror. Time softens the edges of greatness, yet Scipio's legacy refuses to fade. In distant academies of the Renaissance, scholars rediscover his name in crumbling manuscripts. They speak of him as if he were a figure of their own making, the embodiment of humanist virtue, the soldier-philosopher who held reason above wrath. Painters cast him in gold light, his armor gleaming like a sun that never sets. In their brushstrokes, the African plains become eternal, the moment of Zama a parable for the triumph of intellect over instinct. But beneath the beauty, there lingers a sorrow that art cannot conceal. For Scipio's Rome, the republic of law, honor, and service, is long dead. In its place stands a world that worships power without memory, empire without soul. The marble statues that once praised men of character now celebrate men of appetite. The Senate, the legions, the very heart of Rome's spirit, all reduced to echoes. The empire survives, but it has forgotten what made it worth defending. And yet, history is patient. It hides its truths beneath the ruins it leaves behind. When archaeologists dig through the sands of North Africa, they find shards of pottery, coins bearing the names of both Scipio and Hannibal, two enemies bound forever in the sediment of time. On one coin, the inscription reads, Roma Invicta. On another, faint and half-worn, Carthago Nova, victory and ruin, side by side, a reminder that neither endures without the other. A historian in the modern age writes, perhaps Scipio and Hannibal were not opponents but partners, twin flames testing the endurance of human ambition. It is a poetic thought, but perhaps a true one. For every civilization must find its Hannibal, its equal in brilliance and terror, to remember that greatness is not granted by conquest but proven by restraint. In a museum in Rome, there stands a small unassuming bust labeled Scipio Africanus. The features are serene, not triumphant, not proud, but reflective. The sculptor, whoever he was, captured something the chroniclers missed, the weariness of a man who saw too far ahead. Tourists walk past, some pausing, others not, but those who linger swear they can almost hear the hum of distant drums, the rustle of banners on a desert wind. One child, staring up at the statue, asks her father, was he a hero? The father thinks for a moment, then answers softly, he was the man who stopped the end of the world. The child does not understand, but the phrase stays with her, as it stayed, with all those who have ever stood at the edge of history and wondered what it means to win, and so the legend of the Scipios becomes less a story of war than one of inheritance, the inheritance of burden, of choice of conscience. For every empire that rises must face the same trial. Will it remember the wisdom that built it, or only the power that sustains it? Rome's answer lies in its ruins. Carthage's answer lies in its silence. But Scipio's answer lies somewhere between them, carried in the wind that crosses the Mediterranean, the same wind that once filled his sails on the voyage to destiny. The final dawn over Laternum is quiet. The waves break against the shore, erasing footprints no one will see again. In the garden, wildflowers grow between cracked stones, their roots winding through the earth that once held a hero's steps. And when the morning light touches the old inscription, ungrateful fatherland, you will not even have my bones. It glows for a heartbeat like living gold before fading once more into shadow. History continues, indifferent and eternal. Yet in the silence between its turning pages one can still hear it, a voice low and steady speaking from across the centuries. Guard your virtue, even when victory blinds you. Remember your enemies, for they are your teachers. And never forget, empire is the echo of character. The sea answers with its timeless rhythm, as if promising to remember. The echo fades, but it does not vanish. It becomes part of the world's breath, the endless reminder that from Scipio's courage and Hannibal's defiance, the very idea of destiny was born. And long after the last stone of Rome has fallen, the wind will still carry their names across the darkened waters, whispering to the stars that watch them both. For in the end, history is not written in marble nor in flame, but in the hearts that refuse to forget. And thus, The legend of the Scipios becomes eternal, Rome's shield, time's mirror, and the faint, everlasting heartbeat of glory remembered.